Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. Sunday, 24th of May. My mother's birthday. Happy 79, Mum. Preparing for the Outsiders broadcast. First Moondog will be a separate broadcast as usual.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy, and you're not.
Barry, thank you so much. Your outsiders this morning are Stephen Brooke, live editor for the Australian newspaper. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Jonathan.
And Van Badham, Guardian Australia columnist, writer and activist. Good morning, Van.
Good morning.
What a fabulous evening du camp, Stephen. We've had a resounding yes vote in Ireland and Eurovision on the one night. Surely this was no coincidence.
Well, the Ireland referendum was in much better shape than Ireland's entry in Eurovision, which was terrible, and I don't even think made the finals.
As for UK, what a tragedy that was.
You know what? You check out the UK papers. There'll be calls for the head of the BBC executive who put that act up. And Australia, fifth, I think, we drubbed England almost as badly as an Ashes result.
We did okay. We'll come back to Eurovision in a moment. We actually would be crossing to Vienna for the latest in the aftermath. And the vote in Ireland was quite astounding.
It was absolutely wonderful. Yes, it was. It was astounding because recently there was a suggestion that there would be a poll bounce for the no campaign with the so-called shy voter syndrome. And that's not what happened. And over the past couple of days, those of us who lived their lives on the internet saw the Home to Vote campaign of the thousands and thousands of Irish citizens who came back to Ireland to vote yes in the campaign.
Let's just get a little rundown on what took place.
More than 1.2 million people voted in favour of same-sex marriage, while about 730,000 voted against it. Ireland is the first country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage through a popular vote. The Irish Prime Minister Enda Kenny says it's a small country with a big message for equality around the world. The referendum was held 22 years after homosexual acts were decriminalised in Ireland. Same-sex marriage is now legal in 20 countries worldwide. It's illegal in Australia.
Stephen Brooke, those last words there, they're fairly sombre hearing.
Yeah, and a number of points to make about this and how we run our political system and government. I've always thought that politicians are much more conservative and religiously conservative than the rest of the population that they serve. And I think, in a way, it was brilliant of Ireland to, if you like, outsource this decision to the people via referendum, because there was finality, and the results were very clear very early on, and even the no vote opponents and the Catholic Church had to accept it. There was nothing more legitimate than a wide-scale vote of the people. And it is something that Australia could learn from, I think. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a similar referendum here? And I don't really think there'd be much doubt that the result would go the same way. Certainly the opinion polls in Australia point to that.
Well, pollster for the current government, the Conservative pollster Mark Textor, tweeted overnight on hearing the result, if Conservative Catholic Ireland can vote yes 2-1, it lays bare the long-term BS argument that same-sex marriage is a vote killer. That's the thing, isn't it, Van, that politics here is just too nervous of a thing here, which people are pretty happy, according to the polling, to accept.
Well, I think certainly what we've seen in Australia is we know there's an overwhelming popular sentiment in support of equal marriage. The argument has been won. This is an equal rights issue. Either you believe in equal rights for all citizens or you don't. And the laziness of the two major parties to get with the program and just legislate for complete equal rights is, I think, one of the most disappointing characteristics of the present political climate. I mean, we know that there are internal forces within the political parties at work, small minorities of people, not representative of the population at large, not representative of Australian values, who within both of the major parties have been exercising their sway in order to continue stalling on this issue. It's like this sort of desperate attempt of a dying culture to hold back a country from progress. And I mean, the thing about Ireland, I mean, it's regularly called the most conservative country in Western Europe. Not only does Ireland have equal marriage rights now, so does Utah and the state of Alaska in the United States. And here's Australia, egalitarian Australia, Australia, home of the Mardi Gras, Australia, home of diversity and multiculturalism, saying to its section of the population, well, because of the vested interest of a few old cultural warriors, you can't enjoy an equal right. And that's outrageous.
Stephen Brooke, you suggest that a vote here it could be the way to go to sort of bypass that political impasse, to put it to the people, and the people will seem very much on side with this as an issue. But if you look, for example, at how the campaign around the referendum for Indigenous recognition is travelling, these things bring out the worst in us as well. I mean, can we even be trusted to do something like have a plebiscite on same-sex marriage?
Well, the first thing to point about, to make the point about referenda in Australia is that historically they're more often than not and overwhelmingly failures. So it's very rare for referenda to get up, and they need to be bipartisan. And we saw that with the Republic, where John Howard said, have a free vote. I'm opposed to the Republic. It failed. It would be interesting to see what happened here. I agree with Van in that there is a failure of leadership amongst our politicians. And I don't just mean that within a public sense. I mean that in a party political sense, in that they have allowed minorities in their own parties to run this debate. And, Julia Gillard was against gay marriage. The Catholic Labor vote is very powerful and influential within the unions. The Conservative side had their own, very strongly conservative people there. And you have a situation where a vote today would not get up because of the various stances that the politicians have taken in the parliament. So I think that in a way, with a vote out in a referendum, it would be one of those significant social changes that I think would happen relatively easily. And it would be like random breath testing, or it would be like banning smoking inside, where everybody kicked up a huge stink around and pre the decision. And then the first day that it happened, everyone went back to normal and recognized it for the necessary and welcome change that it is.
Quick point, Van, and then we're going to cross to Vienna. We'll come back to this after that.
Yes, well, I mean, we elect leaders to lead us, and to outsource leadership because we can't trust our leaders with it to the people, I think is a really sad debate to make.
Well, I think it says something, though, about where our politics is, that disconnection between popular sentiment and what's politically achievable from the inside of politics is a really interesting disconnection. More on that in a moment, because to disconnect you entirely, but space, time and ideas, we cross back to Vienna, where Chris North joins us. He's SBS Radio's Eurovision reporter. Chris, welcome.
Oh, hi, good morning. And I'll tell you what, the excitement levels in Vienna over the last hour and a half, it's been extraordinary. Since the last time we spoke, the voting started, and then obviously the results have been announced. But it was neck and neck there for a moment. There's no doubt about it. The tension was built. Sweden and Russia going hammer and tongs through much of that voting before Sweden eventually pulled out to a tidy win. Yeah, well, that's right. And they were always called as a favourite. And once again this year, I think it's shown that a favourite has won Eurovision. But there was a very strong chance at one point that they could have been left behind. And so the way that the voting was announced kind of showed that Sweden and Russia were going neck and neck. And then Italy made a little resurgence halfway through, which I thought for a moment, my prediction was Italy months ago, and I thought maybe we could actually do this. Oh dear. This could be the year that Italy wins it. But thankfully, thankfully they stayed where they were. And then there it was in the end.
Now it is official.
It is official.
The winner of the 6th-year Eurovision Song Contest is Sweden!
They have done it again. They are the kings and queens of pop music, Sweden.
What a night it must have been, Chris.
Extraordinary. And I think the comment that was just made there was absolutely spot on. I've just walked out of an interview with our hosts, Julia Zamiro and Sam Pang, and Julia's comment was exactly that. Sweden are the kings of pop. There are more Swedish writers in the Eurovision Song Contest than there are countries. So that just gives you an idea of how good,
That's
it gives you an idea of how good they are at writing these songs. And you think about it, of all the talent, it's a fairy tale. It's a story that was written. Sweden would have to win it.
No fairy tale, however, ever for Guy Sebastian, who nonetheless, voted well.
Oh, that's right. Now, look, let's put it into perspective. So Sweden, Russia, and Italy, then Belgium, who were a dark horse, and then Australia. Now, that's out of 27 countries.
It's kind of weird, really.
Out of 200 million people that watched, and most of those voted. And then suddenly Australia, out of nowhere, came from zero. We all started at zero, and we ended up fifth against, it's unheard of. And the fact that we were top five is something that we should celebrate so strongly and realise now that we are recognised as a real powerhouse.
That said,
it's a talent.
I still think if they'd taken my advice originally, Chris, and sent Kevin Bloody Wilson, the entire thing could have been a very different story.
You know what? That's brilliant, because I reckon if we'd won, I was pitching for Murray Bridge, South Australia, to take the host it.
Yep, nice.
I think there's an opportunity for it. But you know what? Next year, why don't we just send Austin Payton? Let's just dig him up and put a bit of a spoken word element in there and see what happens if we get through the semi-finals. It may not be the same reaction, but
Chris North, thank you so much. Enjoy what I'm sure will be a lingering afterglow there in Vienna as Eurovision wraps up. Oh man, what a night of nights.
Oh, what a night of nights. And no better city than Vienna, and no better celebrity guest than Conchita Wurst. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than bearded drag queens in glitter, and I think that's what we know. That's what Eurovision is all about.
Conchita going through several rather impressive frock changes through the evening too. He looked very much in top form.
They take art and culture very seriously in other countries, Jonathan.
Stephen Brooke, can we bring this back to earth?
Well, by throwing to me, I don't think so, but I'll give it a go.
All right.
I just think we should pick up on the significance of Australia doing so well at its first outing, if you like, in Eurovision, where there was a bit of talk that we shouldn't be there, and a bit of rumbling before the event that it was a bit unfair that we're in there, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is a massive win for SBS. The pressure will be on, I think, for us to go next year to Sweden with another performer, because, Eurovision, as we know, is incredibly inclusive. You only have to look at the lineup of the acts and the performances to get that. And it seems that there was a great deal of goodwill on, from the other performers and the audience for Australia. So long may that continue.
Now, I want to be intensely boring, Van, and go back to what we were...
In the context of Eurovision, I don't know if that's possible, Jonathan.
It's a fairly high bar. This idea of politics and public sentiment being poles apart, and this, of course, is apropos of the gay marriage vote in Ireland. In this country, it's kind of an indicative issue of that divide, is it not? And it's not just around same-sex marriage that we have this issue. This is endemic to our politics, that we think a lot of things, but politics just won't go there with us.
Well, yeah. I mean, we think that, all Australians should be considered equally before the law, which is, a lovely sentiment to have. Australians also really love education, and they love pensions, and they really don't like privatisation. Overwhelmingly, these are the sentiments of the Australian electorate, and we know this because they've been polled on these issues. And what we saw in the Queensland state election in particular was that strong anti-privatisation message was the successful message of the campaign. And, the future for Australian politics is one where hopefully, the people, because of the miracle of social media and the access that ordinary citizens now have to what constitutes public debate, means that really politicians won't be able to ignore, these kind of political sentiments and commonly held values, unless it's at their peril. But for me, something really heartbreaking is you get a politician like Malcolm Turnbull, who's so keen to position himself as, a progressive within the Liberal Party. And, we don't really know much about Malcolm's economic policies unless we study them with terror and fear. But we know that, he's broadly in support of equal marriage and And yet he voted against equal marriage when the vote came up during the last government. And while Julia Gillard took a lot of heat, as well she should have, for voting against, at least she was explicit saying, oh, you know, like, I don't support this for nonsense.
Here endeth the first part of The Outsiders. Back as soon as I can.